Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. In the last part, we restored the Crystal of Wind, after defeating Pazuzu, and after rescuing Hikale's father, Captain Mac, after the entire game, we learned that we're not quite done yet. So now we're in the final dungeon, Doom Castle, which actually got foreshadowed right before we entered Windia, because we got the arrow spell in this place, you might recall. The enemies in here are a lot of things we've actually seen before, though, and there's a good reason for that. Like, you might look at the aesthetics here and say, hey, that sand looks familiar. There's a good reason for that. A lot of the enemies you find in this particular section are going to be more or less based off of ones you fought around the Bone Dungeon. Gorgons are back for some reason, the Shadows are here, zombie minotaurs. There are some newer enemies that aren't from that area around here. For instance, I think the chimeras can show up in 1 or 2 battles. But on the whole, you're going to be seeing a lot of familiar around here. And over here we have the last red chest in the game that matters, which contains the Aegis Shield, the last key item in the game, and by that I mean lost equipment. Increases defense, but also protects us from petrification, which means now Benjamin is honestly nigh unstoppable. I do like the power curve they have with Benjamin, because he really gets so much more powerful than you ever could imagine from the start of the game. And given the rather simple battle system, they did it without him being overpowered, which I do like, because battles can still give you a hard time relative to the game's difficulty, at least, at this point in the game. And you know, I like that. I also love this song. Mind you, this entire game's soundtrack is really good, but this is a pretty noteworthy piece even amongst the rest of the music. Make sure you have your claw out for a lot of this place, though, because not only do you need to climb some walls and hookshot across some places, but the added magic from it, which I think this version of the claw still has, is just really useful. Plus, it's pretty useful against this boss fight, which looks kind of familiar. Boss and first enemy for this part is Skullrus Rex. 10,000 HP, 759 experience points, 0 gold. No weaknesses except I think to curative stuff. Can stone you, put you to sleep, or poison you. And you might notice he looks a lot like the Flamerus Rex we fought back in part 1. Essentially, a lot of the Doom Castle is revisiting the 4 major dungeons, the Bone Dungeon, the Ice Pyramid, the Lava Dome, and the Pazuzu's Tower, aesthetically at least, with some of the enemies from within them, admittedly. And then fighting a reincarnation of sorts of the boss art from that area. Think the 4 Fiends fights from near the end of Final Fantasy I, essentially. And Skullrus Rex is pretty simple, because you just really want to take care of the partner enemies it has, using things like White, if you have it, or Thunder or Meteor is pretty good too. But you actually want to use the claw on it, because he's actually very susceptible to, I want to say it's petrification. I think he's the only boss like that in the area, but hey, it's nice to have a nice little shortcut. I've had it work on the first shot, which is always fun. And hey, this area looks familiar. This is actually the first hallway we were in back in the Focus Tower back in part 2. And there's the door we got the coin for back in Pazuzu's Tower. And now we're in the main part of the area. We're actually going to be now revisiting the Ice Palace area. And on the whole, the game does a pretty good job of making these areas feel like they'd be at home within the dungeons that they're based off of. Though they don't necessarily have the gimmicks from it. It's still a nice little show of like how far you've come or whatever the whole compromisation of the journey kind of thing can be called. As you can tell though, the claw is going to be getting a lot of use here. This is potentially one of the more confusing rooms to navigate, just because there's a lot of pathways you need to go to before you can take another pathway and so on and so forth. None of the other areas have a real puzzle idea to them, aside from just getting to the boss. And even then, that's usually just that usually just comes down to figuring out which path is the correct one. This is the only one where you need to outright go out of your way, press switches, and then backtrack a little bit to go farther into the area. But you know, it kind of summarizes the Ice Palace, doesn't it? Because that place was kind of windy at times. One thing this dungeon doesn't do too well, though, is new enemies. From memory, with the exception of the boss fights, I think there's only one entirely new enemy in here Because even the Shadow, who we first ran into in this place technically, can show up back in Mac's ship, as can I think the other enemy I find in here, which feels kind of lame for an RPG. RPGs usually have a lot of new enemies just for that final dungeon, and having it not be so just feels a little bit wrong. You know? Now, one thing I should go over is levels, because as you can see, Benjamin is level 37. That's actually the level he's going to finish the game off, because I don't quite make level 38. But the maximum level in this game is actually level 41. Technically. Beyond level 41, your stats aren't going to change. However, after every, I want to say, roughly 10 million experience points could give you a couple extra spell charges. Obviously, that's not worth grinding, but it's a thing. And here is the boss for the Ice Palace section. The Stone Golem, but he's also accompanied by 2 Cerberus, the only new standard enemy for the part. 935 HP, 675 experience points, 21 gold, weak to fire. Nothing really special about them otherwise. I think they might be able to petrify you if you physically attack them, but obviously it doesn't mean much at this point. While the Stone Golem has 10,000 HP, 762 experience points, no gold, resistant to fire and earth, and can, I believe, stone you and paralyze you? That sounds right. Basic strategy for this fight we're going to want to take is just take care of the Cerberus with the fire as I did earlier, and then go Flare and White all over him. Just because that does the most damage, and it's just the safest way to play things. Watch out. Oh, he can also confuse you. That's right. Yeah, that's not good. The confusion is actually probably what can make this fight pretty hard, just because, say Phoebe gets confused and uses White on your party, yeah, it's gonna be painful. I think the Stone Golem also has an instant kill attack, but I don't think I've ever seen him use it. And the way that this section is going to work from here on, once we get back to the main corridor, is that once we finish an area, defeat the boss, and leave it, the little pillars blocking the stairway open up and allow us to progress up to the next level. Now it's time for the lava dome section. And there's actually an enemy I miss in here, but it's nothing standard. Nothing too complicated, rather. It's pretty standard. It's that enemy right there on the top right, which is just a... I think that would be an Iflite, a Stheno, and probably a Ninja or a Cerberus. Or Shadow and Cerberus, rather. They do put a couple of chests along the way in this area, but as usual, they're for items you, at this point, you don't really have to worry about running out of. Especially if you've stockpiled as many potions as I have throughout the game. Not much to really fear with them. Them. I can speak well. This also might be the shortest section, too, now that I think about it. And also as probably one of the more interesting revivals, the Twin Head Wyvern. 15,000 HP, 600 experience points, no gold, resistant to fire, but weak to water, wind, and I think that's it, actually. It can paralyze you, poison you. I think that's about all for stats elements it can do. But the strategy for this fight, you're going to want to Meteor and White overall with Benjamin, just because he'll probably kill any little additionals he has pretty quickly. And then just go all out with that standard pattern. Blizzard is useful, but Meteor or White, or Flare, rather, are just going to be more useful. When you run out of wizard magic charges, and you don't want to use a seed in case you're really close to the end of the battle, because you can use seeds in battle, which I have never shown off, you can probably just go all out with arrow, really, at that point. Unless you've just used your wizard charges and never used a seed before a boss fight, like I did. With the amount of damage output you can do between Benjamin and Phoebe at this point, between Flare, Meteor, and White, even the bosses aren't going to be standing that long, because 2,000 HP per turn, per person, is quite the dent. And now we only have one section left to go, and that's the Pazuzu's Tower section. Which is, honestly, probably my least favorite section of this particular dungeon, just because it's pretty bland. The one little design thing I like, they usually give you a little shortcut to get back to the entrance more quickly. And you know, that's nice. I'm not sure what happens, though, if you use the exit spell in this place, because by the time I get to this dungeon, I have no reason to go back to the overworld anyway. So I'm not sure what happens if you use the exit spell, in regards to the boss fights, at least. I assume they'd stay dead, but I guess if you wanted to level grind, this would be the place to do it, because you're roughly getting at least 2,000 experience points of battle. It doesn't take too long to reach level 41, but no thanks. I think the lowest level I've ever finished this game at is probably around 34 or 35. Highest is probably 39. I've never gone for level 41 just because at that point it's just a waste of time in my eyes in terms of the grinding you need to do. But if you want to do it, it's there. Now, the kind of complicated thing about this section, I guess, is two factors. One, you can walk through those little tunnels as you saw earlier. But also, if you're on what's considered the lower level of this area, like where that Thanatos is on the top of the screen right now, you can walk off of those ledges, and you will fall back down to the lava dome area of the Doom Castle. And just because that's a waste of time, you really don't want to do that. Though, when it comes to leaving this particular section of the Doom Castle, it is actually faster to do that because of how small the lava dome area is in terms of getting to the exit compared to the rather windy path you need to take to get to it in this section. It took me some time to realize I could walk through those, I admit, so I was around here for maybe 10 minutes my first playthrough. I mean, there's not really much you can do, plus with the way the pathways are placed, there's only really so much you can do, but it could still get you stuck. And now, time for the Pazuzu reincarnation. Zuh. I think it's supposed to be Zoo, though. The Zoo has 20,000 HP, 750 experience points, no gold, resistant to earth but weak to wind and shoot, as with Pazuzu himself. And comparatively, this is probably the least changed boss fight in terms of HP and everything. I think the only additional ability is that I think he has an added instant kill ability, which I think he might try to use in this battle. I think it's called Doom Dance. He can also still use the same Psych Shield ability where he can reflect magic, so you want to be careful there. If you see him put it up, just go for your physical attacks with arrows and the Excalibur. Although he also can use the Psych Shield as an attack in this fight for some reason, and does 1 damage. Which makes me think that maybe the Claw, if I accidentally use it at some point, might have inflicted a status ailment on him, which I highly doubt. I think the only status ailments most bosses in this game are susceptible to is maybe Silence. Which, even then, isn't too useful because Silence only works on what's considered magical abilities, and I don't think that is. Ow. Keep your healing up also in this entire area, because even though the bosses are just more powered-up versions of the old ones, they do hurt. I'd say the most damage one of these bosses could do in a single attack on a single character is somewhere between 800 and 900 damage. Because now that I think about it, I don't think I've ever seen an enemy reach the 1,000 damage mark on a single non-instant kill attack. I've seen them get close, but I don't think I've ever seen them outright breach 1,000 without it being an instant kill. The only way I could theoretically think of that working would be maybe if there's some debug menu for the game teleporting to this late in the game when Benjamin was still level 1. That's the only way I can think about it. Which, not surprising, but strategy for this fight, though, at this point, after you get rid of the 2 little additionals he has with whatever attacks you wish, just alternate between physical attacks when he has Psych Shield up, and magic attacks like Flare and White. That's all you really need to do. Now, a little tidbit about this game, though, that I find interesting, but is completely useless in the long run. This is also not surprising as to why I haven't brought it up yet. On the original US release of this game, like the one I'm playing, if you press Start and Select on the menu, you can actually see some data about your Super Nintendo, namely what versions of CPU, PPU-1, and PPU-2 your Super Nintendo uses. So you can actually kind of check which version of the Super Nintendo you have. That's only in the first US release, though. Future US releases and Japanese releases, that feature is entirely removed, which is not surprising, because it's kind of pointless, isn't it? And also, because I'm reminded of it, I brought up silence a couple times at this point. Silence is in the game, and it works if it gets inflicted on you, but for some reason, despite showing up in resistances and all that, the game never really hits you with silence. Even if you get hit by the attack, it never seems to get inflicted on you, despite the fact it should, and it does work in the programming. So something's kind of weird and wonky there. I assume maybe they thought the silence stats would be too powerful on the player given how much magic really plays into your strategies in the late game, but it's weird. Hey, that looks like us. Benjamin, Phoebe, Knights of Light. We crystals now entrust you with our power. Okay, why is there a statue of me up here? I do want to use some seeds, though, because we are right before the final boss, and here are the last actual red chests in the game. But all they contain is a large amount of arrows, cure potions, heal potions, and seeds. I think they always contain 25, but I think these are the actual only red chests that might respawn if you leave the area for some reason. Don't quote me on that, though, because I've never left the area. So if you want to heal up and maybe even do some grinding with those, feel free to, because it's probably the best time to do it. But for me, I'm just going to take a look at my stats. Yeah, around 8,000 away from 38, damn. So close, but that's what my stats are looking like. Immunities are all right. Let's save. Yeah, about 14 hours to beat the game. Not surprising. Let's head after and find that final boss. Wow, that's a derpy sprite. Dark King, we meet at last. Indeed. And now you will serve me. I don't think so. We won't allow you to ruin our world. Alas, silly humans, I must share a terrible secret. That prophecy? Ages ago I started that rumor. Welcome to the power of darkness. And by the way, the Dark King has the absolute best battle theme in the game. I love this song. And before we get into the actual fight stats, let's use Cure on him with Benjamin, because he's rather allergic to that. We just broke the damage cap, by the way. For some reason, if Benjamin only uses Cure on this boss, it does absurd damage. How amusing. Is that all you can muster? And as with many final bosses, he actually has more than one form, though in this case, it's all considered 1 HP bar. The Dark King has 40,000 HP. He starts off with the ability to paralyze you, and he's weak to... no, he's resistant to everything but fire, I believe, in every single one of his phases. Second phase here... Now see what I really am! Second phase, he had the ability to use Fire Sword, Ice Sword, Dark Saber, Mirror Sword, Quake Axe, and Cure Arrow, which means he basically has every element to his advantage. Here in the third phase, the major attack you want to look out for is Mega Flare, Mega White, and Golden Web. And in fact, Silver Web too, because that can do a lot of stats elements on you. It's basically Bad Breath in a way. But Mega Flare and Mega White are just the most damaging physical single attacks in the game from the enemy. If there's anything that could probably easily break 1k damage even my current stats, it's probably that. In fact, it might if I actually pay attention. No, not quite. That's still pretty damn hurting, though. Damn hurting. Strategy for this boss, really, if you're not abusing Cure, heal when necessary and go all out. Flare, White, anything's useful. Just keep an eye on your HP, though. If someone's looking a bit low, like they might die, get ready to use Life. Oh, and that's a little thing that I like about this game. Compared to other Final Fantasy games where the character dies, their turn order gets canceled. In this game, not so much. If you lose a character and their turn hasn't come yet, but you revived them by then, their action will still go through. And you know, I like that. More games need to do that. Ow. I believe we're getting to the point, though, where he's entering the last fourth of his HP, because I think he switches up his phases every 10,000. The last phase of the Dark King is almost the exact same, if not the exact same as his first phase, I believe. I think it might entirely be a graphical change, because he goes from looking like a giant, weird spider thing to... I think this is the attack that does it. Yeah. Whatever this giant space octopus thing is. Easily some of the best sprites in the game, though, I have to admit. That's some really good-looking sprite work. I also love the background waviness. Though I'm only just now realizing, the background is only animated behind the Dark King just due to how this game handles the battle backgrounds. Technically speaking, the image below your characters and the image below or behind the enemy are two separate images. Hence why the background behind the Dark King is waving, whereas behind us, it's just kind of staying still. Comparatively, he is the hardest fight in the game, but to compare him to a final boss difficulty in the mainline Final Fantasy games, I'd say he's roughly equal to anything from the first 4 games as final boss, be it Chaos, Emperor, Dark Cloud, anything of those kinds. This is probably around the same difficulty as that. Zeramis, maybe not, actually. Yes, yes! We defeated the Dark King! At last, it's all over. Oh, old dude. You're a crystal. Disguised as a human, I, the Crystal of Light, have guided you. Evil can't thrive if you keep hope alive. Use your courage and respect your world. A bright future awaits you now. Go and enjoy all the world has to offer. Thank you. Not gonna lie, when he first showed up there on my first playthrough, I honestly thought he was going to be a true final boss kind of scenario. I mean, he's been guiding us the entire game and has said very vague things, so why wouldn't he be a potential final villain, right? It would have been funny, but thankfully you were smart about that. I realized, nah, we don't need to do that. Benjamin, you say the Dark King was a problem and you beat him? But of course. Say, what's become of Ruben and Captain Mac? They're fine. They've already headed home. Great. Sometime I'll drop by and say hi. Bye, Normal. I guess you don't really matter. And now we get a bit of a dragon quest around the world in 20 minutes thing. You're safe. What are you going to do now? Hey, maybe you can answer that. Mac, how about lending me that ship? I need a little more adventure in my life. Don't worry, Kaylee. Alright, let me see if it's still seaworthy. Don't forget your cap again. Man, we are getting here really quick. And mind you, I guess there's no real monsters in the way anymore, so it's probably as much of a hop, skip, and a leap away. Especially since we have the crests now, I think about it. Spencer, you still digging? Yep, all because of you guys. Anybody seen Tristam? That jerk. He's gone treasure hunting again. Well, tell him I said hi. Ah, best town with best music. Ruben, what are you doing in here? How's it going? Ruben, couldn't be better. Well, we hang out in this town. No way. I'm out for more adventure in Captain Mac's ship. At least let me see you off. Okay, I guess his mother and Arian don't matter either. Mind you, they really do anyway. Ship's better than new. Thanks, Mac. 3 cheers for Benjamin. Captain Benjamin. Wait until you see my next invention. Can you come over again? Have a good trip. Do it up while you're young. I think I've had all the adventure I can stand. How about taking me along? You'll need an expert treasure hunter. You don't know what you're saying, Grandpa. You'll be back in no time. See the world for me. I'm going to miss you. Is that a hug, or... I'm going to miss you too. Farewell. And Tristam's not here because he is annoying. I guess we're off then. Ah, that's a nice picture of the sea. I know that theme music by now. What are you doing on the ship, Tristam? What are you doing here? I can't resist when I hear about an adventure. I'm gonna keep an eye on you, kid. That's Benjamin, you nut! And on that funny note, the game ends. Final Fantasy Mystic Quest is very much a game, but it's not one I go back to that often for good reason. I'm generally nicer with this game than other people, but it's notably bland compared to the other Final Fantasies, partially just due to the simplicity of it. And I know I've said time and time again that simplicity can sell, but for people looking for an RPG that they'll get completely invested in, even like something like Golden Sun or the Paper Mario games, look elsewhere. However, I do think this is a good game for people who are kids or trying to get into RPGs for the first time, because It does a decent enough job at having RPG mechanics, but I do have to say there are games I think are better for that, like the Paper Mario games, like Super Mario RPG, like Mario and Luigi, like Golden Sun. I could go on. Out of everything with this game, the thing I think most people will get the most mileage out of, is probably the soundtrack, because this soundtrack is so goddamn kick-ass, it's ridiculous. And admittedly, this is actually the first time in a while I've actively gotten tired of a game while recording it. I think it was Pro Jared who made a joke in his review early on in it where he was reading a book while just mashing the A button. It didn't get quite that bad for me, but during some random battles when they were just dragging on, I was probably looking at my phone, reading Twitter, so on and so forth. And that's probably a pretty scary thing for a game to be able to make me do. It's one thing if that happens during loading screens, because they're loading, but if it happens during the main game, something isn't entirely right. If you want to play this game, I think it was only ever on the Super Nintendo, though. I don't think it actually got any Virtual Console re-releases from memory thus far. So you're gonna need to probably go looking for it. And I do admit, I do like this game enough to the point where I think it's the only Final Fantasy Super Nintendo game I actively own, not only in cartridge, but in the box. It doesn't have the manual, but I have the box. It even has the little cardboard thing in it. Actually, what else is in here? That's the consumer information booklet, a Squaresoft, one of those shipping labels you send in, and I think this is a little poster or something for Mario World. I don't know. It's like the only Super Nintendo game I own in box, so I guess that means I cared about it enough to do that. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great night, take care, and I'll see you guys next Let's Play, whatever that may be. And I'll be completely honest, it was originally going to be a certain 11th entry of a certain series, but after some testing, the frame rate is not working out well on my PC, so that's going to need to wait off for a bit. So, impromptu, as usual. See you guys then.